Discord, you heard that correctly. Discord has a once-in-a-lifetime security win that I'm actually pretty excited for. LinkedIn is scraping user data that you should opt out of. Mozilla exits the Fediverse, and more. Welcome to Surveillance Report 196, where we are dedicated to keeping you private and secure with the latest news in the past week. I'm Henry from Techlore.
I'm Nathan from The New Oil.
And our promo segment this week is back to what you might be familiar with. It's pretty much if you get value from this podcast and you enjoy what we do and you like how we're making news in this space accessible and convenient for all of you, you can keep this going by joining us on patreon.com/surveillancepod. And on Patreon, you also get some exclusive perks, like you get to join our Q&A and you get a VIP version of this episode. And you also get to join our Signal group, which is popping off. I just logged in and there was like 76 unread messages and I haven't checked it in like the last few hours, so it's kind of popping over there. If you don't like Patreon, we are on LibrePay, which is like an open source alternative to Patreon. And we also accept one-off tips using Monero if you want to tip us directly and anonymously with no kind of like third-party fees or anything like that. And I'm really happy to announce we actually have a new one. If you thought this was the same promo segment, wow, were you wrong. We're now on XMR Chat. What XMR Chat is it's Monero, so you can send us Monero, but you can leave a message publicly. We have a page there now. We'll leave a link down in the description. The way this is going to work is if you want to ask us a question and be a part of the Q&A, but you don't want to support us on Patreon for one reason or another, you can now just tip us on XMR Chat and leave your message there. As of right now, we're loosely committing to answering appropriate questions from there. But, you know, if there's too many questions, then we might start doing things like, okay, well, Patreon is $5 a month to join. You can't just send us like a 10-cent tip with Monero and ask a question. So we'll find a way to start prioritizing that. But for now, just know that we're going to try to answer most questions in XMR Chat. And we're going to figure that out as we go along, how we're going to cut that off and what we're going to do there. But we're really excited to roll that out. And it's a way that you can join the Q&A without having to join Patreon, which is something we've wanted to do for a long time. So that's all I got. Did I miss anything?
Don't be the internet. Don't ruin a good thing.
Yeah, we just had to revamp our Signal group way to get in. Honestly, the new way's better anyway, but don't ruin nice things. We're trying to listen to your feedback and give you what people are asking for, so we hope you enjoy it. All right, and now we have the highlight story, and this really caught me off guard. So meet Dave. And no, Dave is not our new co-host. Dave is Discord's new end-to-end encryption for audio and video. So last year, Discord started experimenting with new encryption protocols and technologies for audio and video calls. And after experimenting, designing, developing, and auditing, they are announcing Discord audio and video end-to-end encryption. They're going to refer to this as their Dave protocol. They're going to start migrating voice and video in DMs, group TMs, voice channels, and Go live streams to start using end-to-end encryption. You will be able to confirm when calls are end-to-end encrypted and perform verification of other members in those calls. They even include a white paper in the article, which I encourage anyone who's more technical to go and read to see what you think about it. But the really exciting thing about this is proper end-to-end encryption in Discord. Now, a lot of people were probably hoping for some kind of end-to-end encryption on Discord with text. That is not currently a thing that they're doing. This is simply if you're doing a call and again, a DM, group TM, group DM, voice channel, or a Go live stream. I no longer know what a Go live stream is, but it is end-to-end encrypted. So I think I'm taking wins where I can with platforms that have never made any progress towards any privacy and security. I can't actually name a single thing since I ever heard of Discord. You know, from the moment that it entered my brain, I can't pinpoint a single time that they've made a positive step forward for privacy and security. And this is the first thing that I can actually think of them moving in a good direction with this. And I think it makes sense because most likely a lot of moderation tools and a lot of different spam abuse types of things aren't dependent on the actual discussions that are happening via audio channels. I feel like it's just really hard to process that, and most of the abuse they're trying to take care of is going to be done via text. So in terms of trying to moderate the platform, they probably realized, well, actually it doesn't make much sense, and we can actually give some security to our users with some end-to-end encryption. So those are kind of my loose thoughts so far. I'm a big fan of this. Yes, Discord still has a ton of other problems. I'm not saying it's a perfect platform, a million other problems, but I'm excited to see this. And I think it's a great step forward.
I agree. I don't really have too much to add to this. I'm still not a fan of Discord. I believe they did actually open source the cryptographic aspects of it. It seems to me like they're at least trying to do everything right here. The more mainstream platforms that roll out end-to-end encryption like Discord and Meta and stuff like that, the less leg the government has to stand on when they're like, oh, only pedophiles and drug dealers use encryption. What do you have to hide? And it's like, nothing. See my Discord calls at any rate. See my Facebook messages. See my WhatsApp messages. Like, these are widely used platforms that people are just now automatically using end-to-end encryption with zero effort on their end to do nothing nefarious.
No, I think that's a good point. I think it builds the resilience of encryption when more and more people implement encryption. And I think that's a really strong selling point for this.
My only complaint is I never thought I would praise Facebook, but the reason they're not turning it on for text messages ostensibly is because they still want to be able to do moderation, which they don't do anyways, but whatever. I never thought I would say this, but I feel like WhatsApp, as far as I'm aware, I'm not a WhatsApp user, but from the articles I've read in my newsfeed, I feel like WhatsApp really hit the perfect balance there, where from what I understand, when you report a message in WhatsApp, it decrypts like the last 5 messages and then sends it to them. So your keys are still never compromised. They have the context, or at least some of the context for the message. I don't understand why they can't just do something similar to that.
I've heard similar things with WhatsApp's moderation, and I also agree, actually. It's a pretty good middle ground because it's the user's choice to report that content. And again, it's no different from someone screenshotting the chats and sending it along to Facebook. And so I think that having that built-in moderation actually makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I think it'd be cool for Discord to take something similar to that. And I think that would work well with a platform like them. I think my big gripe is DMs, honestly. I don't mind servers not having end-to-end encryption. I mean, it doesn't make sense to have end-to-end encryption in something that's mostly public and that has hundreds of people in it, which is most Discord servers. I mean, even Matrix servers, you're crazy to enable end-to-end encrypted Matrix servers if you're going to have dozens, if not hundreds of people. You're probably not going to enable it. So I think my big issue is DMs. I think people have an expectation that DMs carry a certain amount of privacy, and that when you're communicating with someone you know and you're discussing something sensitive, you should be able to share a password with them and have the guarantee that there's no one else able to access that information, which is not the case with Discord right now. Right now, if you send the password to one of your friends on Discord, Discord can have access to that message, which isn't good for a million reasons.
And with that, we'll move into our data breaches section. So we're going to start off with ServiceNow, which has had over 1,000 instances found leaking corporate knowledge base data. ServiceNow is a cloud-based software platform organizations can use to manage digital workflows across various departments and processes. It is a complete solution that incorporates IT services and IT operations management, HR tasks, customer service management, security tools integration, and a knowledge base. The knowledge base feature acts as a repository of articles where organizations can share how-to guides, FAQs, and other internal procedures for users authorized to view them. However, as many of these articles are not meant to be seen publicly, they can contain sensitive information about an organization. The exposed information includes personally identifiable information, internal system details, user credentials, access tokens for live production systems, and other essential information depending on the knowledge base topic. This is still a significant problem despite ServiceNow's updates in 2023 explicitly aimed at improving access control lists, but which didn't apply to knowledge bases.
Temu has denied a breach after a hacker claims theft of 87 million data records. So they published samples of the stolen data that contained usernames and IDs, IP addresses, full names, date of births, gender, shipping addresses, phone numbers, and hashed passwords. But their security team said that they did an investigation into the data breach and can confirm that the claims are false and the data being circulated is not from their systems. Not a single line of data matches their transaction records. The threat actor claims to still have access to the company's email and internal panels and that there are vulnerabilities in their code, but the threat actor did not share any proof of these claims, and Bleeping Computer cannot determine whether they are valid.
Dell is investigating a data breach claim after an attacker leaks employee info. This comes from a threat actor going by the name Grep, who is posting on a data breach forum like usual, and they are claiming that the vendor suffered a minor data breach in September of 2024, so this month as we're recording this, that affected over 10,000 employees. This includes employees' unique identifiers, full names of employees for Dell and partners, status of employees, like whether they're active or not, and an internal identification string. The entire database can be revealed by spending one breach forum's credit, which is approximately 30 cents. Dell says they are investigating.
AT&T pays $13 million FCC settlement over 2023 data breach. This is to resolve a probe into whether the giant failed to protect consumer data after a vendor's cloud environment was breached 3 years ago. The investigation also examined their supply chain integrity and whether the giant engaged in poor privacy and cybersecurity practices. So the vendor was required to destroy or return the data after the contract ended years before the breach, and it actually failed to do so, which is what they found. And AT&T was found to have inadequately monitored the vendor's compliance with their contractual obligations. The consent decree mandates AT&T to implement a comprehensive information security program that includes broad customer data protection, improve its data inventory processes to track data stored with vendors, ensure that vendors follow retention and disposal rules for customer information, and conduct annual compliance audits to assess AT&T's compliance with these requirements.
Now we'll move into the company news. We're going to start with a big one you guys have probably heard about in the news. LinkedIn scraped user data for training before updating its terms of service. LinkedIn users in the US, but not the EU, EEA, or Switzerland, likely due to those regions' data privacy rules, have an opt-out toggle in their settings screen disclosing that LinkedIn scrapes personal data to train content creation AI models. The toggle isn't new, but as first reported by 404 Media, LinkedIn initially didn't refresh its privacy policy to reflect the data use. The terms of service have now been updated, but ordinarily that occurs well before a big change, like using user data for new purposes like this. The idea is that it gives users an option to make the account changes or leave the platform if they don't like the changes. Not this time, it seems. So what models is LinkedIn training? Its own, the company says in a Q&A, including models for writing suggestions and post recommendations. But LinkedIn also says that generative AI models on its platform may be trained by, quote, another provider, unquote, like its corporate parent, Microsoft. So to opt out of LinkedIn's data scraping, you can head to the data privacy section of the LinkedIn settings menu on desktop, click Data for Generative AI Improvement, then toggle off the Use My Data for Training Content Creation AI Models option. You can also attempt to opt out more comprehensively via a form, which is linked in the article, but LinkedIn notes that any opt-out won't affect training that's already taken place. The nonprofit Open Rights Group, or ORG, has called on the Information Commissioner's Office, or ICO, in the UK's independent regulator for data protection rights to investigate LinkedIn and other social networks that train on user data by default. And as of tonight, we do actually have an update on that. LinkedIn has stopped grabbing UK users' data for AI. I'm going to go ahead and quote the executive director of the ICO. We are pleased that LinkedIn has reflected on the concerns we raised about its approach to training generative AI models with information relating to its UK users. We welcome LinkedIn's confirmation that it has suspended such model training pending further engagement with the ICO.
For those who have been following the saga of data breach removal services, Optery was one of the better performing ones on the research that we covered not too long ago that talked about how many data breach removal services don't work very well. Anyway, Optery sends your data to OpenAI now, by default, if you're a paid subscriber. This is posted by Privacy Guides, who has delisted Optery from their website because of this just automatic opt-in AI functionality built into Optery without alerting their users. And it's not for the purpose of removing your data from the internet. It's only used to generate reports of the service that they deliver to you. So if you're an existing Optery customer, you can disable the functionality in your account settings.
All right, quick update from Future Nate. Between when we recorded this and when I was still editing, thankfully, there is an update. Optery has reversed this decision. They have now moved all users to an opt-in model. So if you previously opted out, don't worry, you're still good to go. If you use Optery and you haven't opted out yet, you're good. They have apologized. They have reverted everything to opt-in only. So now if you want this feature, you can go opt-in. Otherwise, you're good to go. And our last company story, Mac OS Sequoia change breaks networking for VPN and antivirus software. Users of Mac OS 15, aka Sequoia, are reporting network connection errors when using certain endpoint detection and response or virtual private network solutions and web browsers. The issues are resolved when these tools are deactivated, indicative of incompatibility issues with the network stack. So we're talking about things like CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, like things that you would typically see in a business environment, not like Proton, Molvad, Objective-C, stuff like that. Bleeping Computer specifically mentions those two. CrowdStrike has advised customers not to upgrade to Mac OS 15 because of changes in the OS's networking structures. SentinelOne support also warned users not to upgrade to Sequoia just yet due to usability issues discovered recently. Apple has not responded to press requests regarding the issues, but Bleeping Computer has found that macOS 15 release notes show that a feature in the operating system's firewall has been deprecated, which may be causing the issues.
We're going to dive into the research now, and there's a dating app called Field, which actually exposed your nudes and data publicly. And this was from a listener, so thanks for submitting this. But Field is a dating mobile app, kind of like Tinder, Bumble, and others, but on steroids, meaning you can filter by distance, by age, by gender, couples, and by location. For premium users, and here's why it's on steroids, you can also search by the type of kink, three-ways, group scenarios, or the type of relationship you're interested in. We reviewed the security controls, not we as Nate and I, but the researchers reviewed the security controls implemented and discovered the following vulnerabilities. In particular, except for the first one, all others fall under the category of broken access control, according to OWASP Top 10, disclosure of profile information to non-premium users. It read other people's messages, unauthenticated access to other people's attachments from their chats. It allowed deletion and recovery and edit other people's messages, update someone else's profile information, get a like from any user profile, send messages in other people's chats, and view other people's matches. The article has detailed step of each vulnerability. Field did fix them, but it took them 6 months.
This next article, the headline says, gaining access to anyone's browser without them even visiting a website. I found this through the Techlore forums, and the person who posted it had a great summary, so I'm going to quote them. Arc browser has a boost feature wherein you can apply custom styling and scripting to specific web pages, essentially built-in user styles and user scripts. Boosts are stored in Google's Firestore and tied to one's mandatory Arc account via a user ID. By exploiting the way boosts are saved, it was possible to tie the boost to another user ID that is not your own, thus effectively granting you a remote code execution. This vulnerability was patched on August 26th. Additionally, the security researcher raised privacy concerns given how the domain pattern matching for Boost contradicts Arc's privacy policy, which says we don't know which websites you visit. The person who posted the summary says, I've only done a quick summarization of this pretty insane vulnerability, so be sure to give the full write-up by this author a read.
Politics. I feel like both of us were on the fence of even including this because there actually isn't much of a security angle here. The Hezbollah device explosions. So for those who missed this, there were some devices that were pagers that just randomly exploded across Lebanon on Tuesday and Wednesday. And this also happened to walkie-talkies as well. So there were 2 separate incidents of this happening. And a lot of people, and even after actually the information came out that this was not a cyber attack per se, some people still came back to me and said, oh yeah, well, lithium-ion batteries could definitely explode like this. And it's like, look, that's just not what happened. So pretty much this was a supply chain attack that caused these explosions. Turns out that these are like shell companies that were created from the ground up years ago to actually have the ability to start doing attacks like this. So that's how this was done. This wasn't a magic vulnerability that infected people's phones, disabled any kind of like power protections in the batteries and then made the batteries explode. A lot of people said early on that batteries don't explode like that just by themselves. And very early on, people established that there definitely were some kind of third-party explosive sound in this, but it's because there were these companies that were established to essentially pull off a supply chain attack like this. And they were able to plant a small amount of explosives that were remotely executed at the same time. And that was the other kind of tip-off as well, is a cyber attack like this probably wouldn't have universally just hit everybody at the same time. And this was very well planned out, just for the record. I mean, they even timed it. So what they did is they sent a notification to these pagers, and then the actual explosion happened a few seconds after the notification. So kind of the goal there was they would hope that people would check the device or bring it up to their face before it exploded. So it's really kind of messed up stuff here. But this is not really a cyber attack. It's a supply chain attack, but some might argue a supply chain attack can be a cyber attack, but there isn't some like magic behind the scenes stuff that happened here, if that makes sense.
This is another actually really big story that's kind of making the rounds. It says an FTC study finds vast surveillance of social media users. The Federal Trade Commission said on Thursday that it found several social media and streaming services engaged in a, quote, vast surveillance of consumers, including minors, collecting and sharing more personal information than most users realized. The FTC said it began its study nearly 4 years ago to offer the first holistic look into the opaque business practices of some of the biggest online platforms that have created multi-billion-dollar ad businesses using consumer data. The agency said that the report showed the need for federal privacy legislation and restrictions on how companies collect and use data. Included in the study were streaming platforms Twitch, which is owned by Amazon, the messaging service Discord, who we talked about at the top, the photo and video sharing app Snapchat, and the messaging board Reddit. Twitter, now renamed X, also provided data. I didn't include it here in the notes, but I think they included Meta, Google, and I think Amazon, but don't quote me on that. The study did not disclose company-by-company findings. Companies have argued that they've tightened their data collection policies since the studies were conducted, and many of the companies could not tell the FTC how much data they were collecting according to the study. And the last thing I want to add was the article includes this comment. Efforts by the companies to police themselves also haven't worked, the FTC concluded in its report. Quote, self-regulation has been a failure, unquote.
California has 5 new AI laws that are going to try to crack down on election deepfakes and actor clones. So this was signed as some of America's toughest laws regulating the artificial intelligence sector. And 3 of these laws crack down on AI deepfakes that could influence elections, while 2 others prohibit Hollywood studios from creating an AI clone of an actor's body or voice without their consent. Another law requires disclosures of AI-generated political advertisements. That means moving forward, Trump may not be able to get away with posting AI deepfakes of Taylor Swift, endorsing him on Truth Social. The FCC has proposed a similar disclosure requirement at a national level and has already made robocalls using AI-generated voices illegal. The last 2 AI laws signed on Tuesday, which the nation's largest film and broadcast actors union was pushing for, which is called SAG-AFTRA, creates new standards for California's media industry. This requires studios to obtain permission from an actor before creating an AI-generated replica of their voice or likeness. Meanwhile, it also prohibits studios from creating digital replicas of deceased performers without consent from their estates.
All right, this next story comes from New Zealand and is also from a listener, so thank you for sending this in. Inland Revenue is giving thousands of taxpayer details to social media platforms for ad campaigns. Inland Revenue said that all the details were fully protected by anonymization using a hashing process. They said that they generate between 30 and 50 custom audience lists a month, which they use to target specific ads to customers on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Google platforms. The lists uploaded monthly are for things like student loans, where the overseas-based customer population is constantly changing with people moving overseas or returning home. Before a target audience can be matched, IRD's privacy officer completes a privacy impact assessment and agrees for us to use Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Google. The lists include up to 500,000 customers each, with names, dates of birth, addresses, phone numbers, and email contacts. However, in response to the hashing thing, in July, the United States Federal Commission said in a press release that hashing is not adequate protection. European regulators who looked at hashing in 2019 concluded that there was a re-identification problem and several more steps had to be taken to protect the data. Inland Revenue said it was fully compliant with the Tax Administration Act and the Privacy Act.
All right, this next story is kind of a saga. There are new key rules being proposed by DOT under the new Telecom Act in India. Since the Telecommunications Act in 2023, which went into effect in June of this year, the Department of Telecommunications has been gradually proposing various sets of rules that would put key parts of the revamped legislative framework into action. The DOT so far covers important aspects of internet shutdowns, cybersecurity, surveillance, and setting up telecom infrastructure in the country, among others, and all rules of the new Telecom Act will be notified within the next 180 days. Some of these include temporary suspension of telecommunications service rules. So pretty much internet shutdowns can be ordered by the Home Secretary of the Union Ministry of Home Affairs at the national level or the secretary in charge of the state home department at the state level. And a shutdown order needs to be published and needs to clearly state the reasons why the internet was suspended. The order would further need to clearly define the geographical area of the internet shutdown and specify its duration, which cannot go beyond 15 days. And there are a few other little legalities around this. The telecommunications rules of 2024 interception orders can be issued by officials with the same titles as those who handle shutdown orders that we just covered, and those can contain the name of the agency intercepting the messages and state the reasons for interception. And these orders will only be valid for 60 days unless renewed, and these orders can't last longer than 180 days at a time. Agencies are required to maintain records of the intercepted messages, details of individuals behind the messages, details of the officer or agency intercepting the messages, the number, and a few other data points. They need to be destroyed, though, every 6 months unless they're required for functional requirements. The committee is required to meet every 2 months to decide the legal validity of an interception order and record its findings. We're almost done. There's one more here, and then we'll kind of do some takeaways. So the next one is a draft rule which allows the central government to collect traffic data from telecom entities. Traffic data is defined as any data generated, transmitted, received, or stored in telecommunication networks, including data relating to the type, routing, duration, or type of a telecommunication. This can be collected from and shared with any national level law enforcement or security agency, as well as other telecom entities and users. The draft rules require these agencies to put in place adequate safeguards that prevent unauthorized access to the data, but the central government is empowered to set up digital mechanisms to identify any act that endangers telecom cybersecurity. Like the other ones, there are reports and there are different legalities around what can be done with this kind of stuff for the public interest. There is a little more that we already covered a lot, and that's kind of the pricing security focused stuff.
And our last political story, Ukraine has banned Telegram on military and government devices over security risks. The head of Ukraine's defense intelligence warned that Russian intelligence services could access Telegram users' data and messages, including deleted ones. He stressed that the widespread use of instant messaging platform is not merely a matter of privacy risks impacting users, but also a national security threat. Despite the ban, Telegram will remain widely used for communication and news dissemination in Ukraine, including updates on airstrikes, given that the ban does not apply to ordinary users. And they mentioned there is, of course, an exception for people who have a legitimate need for it, like the president himself will need to send out messages because it is a popular app.
Right, and now we have the open source news, and we only have one story in this section this week, and it's from Mozilla, who has announced they're exiting the Fediverse and will shutter its Mastodon server in December. For those unfamiliar, in the Fediverse, like Mastodon, you have to have people host servers that you can join, and there's dozens, hundreds of these out there. Mozilla hosts their own that they have there called Mozilla.social. They've announced they're going to shut that down, as the title very directly said. And in the meantime, users will be able to download their data or migrate their account to another Mastodon instance if they choose. The instance was really small. There was only 270 active users at the time of Tuesday's announcement. And by comparison, the most popular Mastodon instance, Mastodon.social, has almost 250,000 monthly active users. Nate and Jonah both offer instances. I use OMG LOL for my instance, and there's a million other instances out there.
With that, we're going to move into Misfits. The headline says, Life imitates XKCD comic as Florida gang beats crypto password from retiree. This comes from Ars Technica. The short version is honestly exactly what the headline says. There was a not very well organized criminal who literally broke into somebody's house and threatened them until they logged into their Coinbase or whatever. I forget I think it was Coinbase or Kraken, something like that, and transferred all their crypto to his own wallet, or his boss's wallet, I think it was. I'm not sure if this was an isolated incident. I would assume it's probably not. I think I've seen other articles about this kind of thing happening. It's a fascinating read. Ars wrote it as a very narrative-driven thing, so it's like reading a story that unfortunately happened in reality.
There's an internet surveillance forum called Sandvine. It says it's leaving 56 non-democratic countries. So they make surveillanceware that allowed authoritarian countries to censor the internet and spy on their citizens, and announced that they're leaving dozens of these non-democratic countries as part of their major overhaul of the company. So they will be leaving them by the end of March 2025. And for the remaining countries, that was Egypt specifically, that they're leaving in March of 2025. It will be by the end of 2025 for most other countries. That is it for the week. Discord has a once-in-a-lifetime security win. Hopefully it is not once in a lifetime, and hopefully they have more. I am cheering for them. But that's the first time I've actually cheered on Discord. LinkedIn is scraping user data that you should opt out of, as well as apparently Optory, who also pointed fingers at LinkedIn for doing the same thing. Mozilla exits the Fediverse, and more. Again, this podcast is very, very still much supported by the community and all of you people listening. So if you want to contribute to this podcast and you want us to keep doing this every single week and keep building the quality up, Patreon is the best place to do that. And the cool thing about Patreon is we can also give you perks in exchange for your support of the podcast. We're on Signal, so you get to join a Signal group, and Nate and I are in the chat, and it's pretty popping over there pretty recently. So I've been having a lot of fun in that chat. And then if you don't like Patreon for whatever reason, we're also in LibrePay. And then there's also Monero. And now the newest way to support us with Monero is with XMR Chat. We'll leave a link to that down in the description. Pretty much you just type a message and then put in your contribution amount of Monero. And then it'll leave like a public record of people who send us messages. So you can ask us questions in our next Q&A. So if you want to join our Q&A in advance, go ahead and leave us something on XMR Chat. That's all we have for all of you. Thank you for listening to the surveillance report. Again, links to all stories can be found in the show notes, and you can also send us tips if you have any. The final thing we want to ask you to do is to share our podcast around. Make sure you're subscribed and give us a rating if you're able to do that. That's how we can make this podcast spread around. And I checked our Apple a podcast review for the first time in a long time, and I'm still seeing 5 stars, which is freaking awesome. So thank you everybody who's given us a rating. I'm glad to see and hear that what we're delivering is what you want. So let us know what we can do to keep that relationship going. And we thank you all for listening. And I think that's all I have. So we'll see you all next week.